Today we have a special mid-series crossover, 1-1 Rockies Padres. Who's going to take this series and who has the more impressive report card after 1 month in the season? I don't think it's that hard of an answer.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans and Padres fans, welcome into a special mid-series crossover between the Locked On Rockies podcast and the Locked On Padres podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. My podcast counterpart today, the one, the only, Javier Reyes of the Locked On Padres podcast. Tough break for you there, Javi, but not going to lie, we needed that.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, here's the thing. The Padres are just always on edge. You know what I mean? We're always going to be on edge. And that's because of what happened last year. And this is something that has been used in the Twitter ethos and the discussions of the Padres online or by reporters, which is, you know, when something feels very 2023. And this felt a little bit like that. Granted, the Padres they've made comebacks this year. You might have heard about the 8-run comeback. The Dodgers won a few, like last weekend, where they started crying afterwards. They've had moments, don't get me wrong, but this was a game where you're up 4-1, Michael King's dealing at least decently enough, and then just completely explodes. Granted, there was a fielding error by Jake Cronenworth, but even still, bunch of singles, and then your boy, and dare I say our boy, because we've both talked about him whenever we've crossed over, Brendan Rodgers with the grand slam. And what made it 2023 wasn't that. What made it 2023 is they were hitting all over the place to start, and then as soon as they were down, dead the rest of the way. Short at bats, not taking the end of the game, Jerickson Profar, first pitch. You know what I mean? I mean, that happened a lot. That wasn't the only one, but just seemingly just lost it. Like the feeling just completely cratered. And given that you're facing this Rockies team and you're in Coors Field, you'd think that bottom four, okay, we're down by 2. It's okay. You know what I mean? It's okay. Like, we could come back. That's what Coors is for. And they felt like they just laid down. You know what I mean? It just did not feel like they had it in them tonight, which stinks because the bullpen kept it relatively okay, considering King's disaster class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big things there, I mean, the Rockies have been that team that's kind of fallen flat and hasn't been alive. I mean, literally, there's some crazy stats, and we'll dive into that. But before we dive into everything, I want to shout out our everydayers. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. And also, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest way and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Javi, that was the difference. I mean, we haven't seen this Rockies team. I mean, this is a Rockies team that is down bad. This is a Rockies team that continues to set the wrong types of history, the wrong milestones, and it happens again. The Rockies fall behind they have never led. I'm sorry. They have not had a game in 2024 where they have not trailed at some point. They've tied the 1910, whatever I can't remember whatever the name that Patrick Lyons brought up for the comparison there. The Rockies are down bad, but in that moment, finally, Brendan Rodgers, who has struggled all season long to get that grand slam, it's not a season changer. It doesn't mean you win the series, but man, if that's not what the Rockies needed right there and something to actually make you feel a little bit good about, because everyone, you know, the thing, Javi, everyone's like, Coors Field, Rockies offense, blah, blah, blah. This team is setting records of not scoring at home lately. I mean, this team is literally in the deepest and darkest of depths when it comes to terrible milestones. But this is the type of game, if you're going to look at a streak to build, this would be to build off of. But the Rockies haven't been able to build streaks in years. They haven't won back-to-back ball games since August of last year. I mean, that's not even counting this whole month. That's still a whole month and change of baseball last year before you do that. So it's Rockies fans are looking for little victories, and that game finally makes you feel a little bit better. And as for Padres fans, maybe you can just kind of chalk that one up as Coors. Is that how you feel, like, kind of at the end of a game like that?
A little bit. I mean, he smoked it. Don't get me wrong. We could get into the elevation, all that. But I mean, Brendan Rodgers did smoke it. And there was a lot of singles before that. Maybe you could argue those ones were a little bit like the Coors Field effect, because actually, I think statistically, like the big Great American Ballpark for the Reds is actually more conducive to home runs than Coors Field. But Coors Field might help with batting averages and hits coming through and whatnot. At least that's the last time I checked. So, yeah, sure. But 890 expected batter. At the very minimum, it's like a bases. You're getting an RBI off of that hit. I don't care where it is, right? Like, he absolutely smoked that launch angle and everything. And, the Rockies, like you said, like, yeah, they've been struggling. It was funny on the broadcast, on the Padres broadcast, at least. They showed like Rockies bullpen. They're 12th in ERA, 12th in this. And I was like, oh, that's not too bad. And then I saw NL rankings and I was like, oh crap. And then that's why this is an upsetting loss for the Padres, because you had the lead. And Michael King, by the way, was dealing pretty well. Final stats, like on the game: 7 whiffs on 17 swings for his 4-seam fastball, 8 whiffs on his 19 swings on his changeup. Like, his top 2 pitches that had him really dazzle last week against the Brewers, even though that they had lost, or I think it was it the Brewers or the Blue Jays? I'm blanking, but whatever. Like, he had a great start there, and then he built on that, and it's like, okay, here we go. And then just once again, he's just been so uneven this year. And even the games when he hasn't given up a lot of runs, he's had bad peripherals, which has made me concerned. And while, yes, he's transitioning from being more of a bullpen guy to a full-time starter, bottom line is, he's a guy that's trying to get strikeouts. He's trying to miss bats, and he's had some bad peripherals there and the drop in velocity. So considering he's been the big return piece in the Juan Soto trade, not great, Bob. Right? Like, not great so far. It feels like Dylan Cease is the one that has been the return piece, even though he hasn't. Although, in some ways, if you want to be really, crafty about it, they traded for, who was it that they got? What's the Yankees prospect? I'm blanking on his name, but they, not Johnny Brito. I can't remember his name, but one of the prospect pitchers they got, they then traded for C. So, ostensibly, maybe he was the best in return. So that's not great. And it continues, Paul. It continues the trend of the Colorado Rockies being Padres kryptonite. They're literally called Rockies. The purple glowing rock just destroys the Friar superhuman, whatever you want to, like, if you want to animeify it. In fact, last few years, I figured, get some stats for the listeners. You know what I'm saying? Last year, they were 9-4 against the Rockies, so they were good. But year before that, 9-10, and year before that, 8-11. Arguably worse teams. So it's real. Like, the whole, like, the Padres aren't good at facing the Rockies thing. And it's just been, it rears its head around. They just look better. Last night, they made this, there was a great defensive play on Jay Cronenworth, robbing of, yes, the Padres win the game, but the Rockies, man, they love playing the Padres. I guess the beef over the holiday touch home plate thing is just continuing.
I swear there is something to that. There is something about not like that connection there. Like, for me, it really truly feels like the one time where the Rockies still kind of have a fighting chance. I don't know what it is about the Padres, but the games always are wacky, weird, sometimes close, sometimes blowouts. But when it comes to the end of the season, the records are usually close. Last year, with the exception, the NL West had no problem dominating the Colorado Rockies last year. But, it used to be the Rockies and the Diamondbacks kind of had that same thing. But, man, as the opening series and the 2 matchups with the Diamondbacks so far, it really seems like those 2 teams are on different levels. And the Padres and Rockies are certainly still on 2 levels. But it is that weird thing of the Padres, especially at Coors. I have to imagine, realistically, in the Padres locker room, they hate going to Coors Field. I really truly think deep down they're like, we might score 9, but we're going to give up 11 because of, we're going to throw a ball away. And in this game, you saw it. There was a lot of hits that kind of just dink dunk landed, hit certain spots in Coors. It's so open in the outfield there that you just get enough. I got to imagine going to Colorado was a very annoying experience for not only the Padres, but Padres fans as well.
Absolutely, man. It's just, you're just reminded of it. And don't get me wrong, all in all, they have been better. I just talked about last year, but there's just this feeling, you know what I mean? Even if it's statistically last year, but the year before, CJ Cron haunts us. I remember the walk-offs to start off their season last year. The Padres get smoked by the Rockies, right? Like, there was 7-2, this most anticipated season in franchise history, and that's how they start off, and it set the tone the rest of the way for the Padres a lot of 2023. So it's a really frustrating loss, but it is one loss. They could still go out and win the series. That was what I talked about for my show. Just, you got to win 3 out of 4. This is a team you need to beat. You need to get ahead in the standings, because NL West standing so far, everyone, in fairness, has been treading water, including the Dodgers, who almost lost what will be last night after Evan Phillips almost blew the game to Jesse Winker, the Nationals, right? So, like, they've been shaky too. It's just been a very competitive division, but not because every team's been amazing, but because they've been very up and down so far.
And I think that's a good lead into our next segment. I want to talk about some NL West storylines, especially that Dodgers thing. And I want to talk about where your confidence lies with the Padres here, and kind of I'm sure Padres fans might want to know a little bit about the misery that is going on with the Rockies, even with the win here. We're going to dive into that and more coming up here on today's crossover episode of Locked On Padres and Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about some of the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you to listen all up for this huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eyes on the score, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to finally announce I didn't even come close to making it to the top. But that's right, you can take on the leaderboards with the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But you can check out the leaderboards where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store and Google Play. We're also brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players and stats and watch the winnings roll in. You can do it for Rockies, Padres. You can pick both Rockies and Padres players, maybe home runs, hits, or maybe you want to buy into the red hot Denver Nuggets and buy into taking Jamal Murray over on 3-pointers, more, or on Nikola Jokic rebounds. Whatever you want to do, you can check it all out at PrizePicks. They offer weekly promotions and special offers for the biggest moments in sports, and they now offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. Download the app today, the PrizePicks app, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a $100 first deposit match when you use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB when you download the PrizePicks app today. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Folks, this is the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Rockies and Locked On Padres, bringing you daily Rockies and Padres content. And you can find your play-by-play action of Rockies and Padres on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Just search Rockies or Padres on SiriusXM or the SiriusXM app. You'll be taken to where you need to go. Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres joining me. I'm Paul Holden, host of Locked On Rockies. Rockies split this series, finally showing some offense at home. And I just want to read you a couple of stats or a couple of storyline type things from the Colorado Rockies that they've been facing this year. Because I want to talk about some storylines that you've been missing here. Update on Rockies Kris Bryant, though he's eligible to come off the IL on Wednesday. That won't happen. No baseball activity yet. He's talked with doctors, but his back injury, but has not undergone test. Manager Bud Black said no talk of surgery. That's from Patrick Saunders. Patrick Lyons writes this: nearly half of the Colorado Rockies' estimated $168.3 million payroll, including 5 of their 7 highest paid players, is on the injured list. That includes Kris Bryant, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, German Marquez, and Daniel Bard. Let's see here. The Rockies, of course, falling behind and trailing in every single game so far this season. Javi, the storylines haven't been great for the Rockies. Literally have been miserable. And it's games like these that remind you that, hey, there's a fighting chance. There's a life here. Out of the things that you've heard about the Rockies this year so far, is there anything that sticks out to you going into the series and 2 games in? I know this is the first time the Padres and the Rockies have matched up, but the Rockies make their rounds as the joke of the internet sometimes, so I'm sure you've seen some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say with the Rockies, and I forgot if we said this. I might have said it last year where I was like, look, every team has to have at least someone worthwhile. I mean, the A's have Zach Geloff or whatever and Paul Blackburn. So I think last year I said, like, hey, you never know with Ezequiel Tovar, but it seems like this is the year. In fact, so he was like most rookies, it took him some time, but it seems like he's been really impressive and actually been like insanely clutch, if I'm not mistaken, this year. So
Easily
that's
the
really
Rockies'
cool.
best player, I would say, overall. I mean, he has been consistent. He has been great. Ryan McMahon has an argument there, but those two
Mhm.
would be easily the players that have had the most success so far this season.
Yeah, and I think that Tovar is like a nice, really nice bright spot that you could build off of. I have been interested in the fact that Nolan Jones has not been very good so far. In fact, I think that he's been quite bad defensively the last time that I checked, although I don't know for sure. Again, this is your team. I mean, heck,
Yeah.
you practically have the Charlie Blackmon beard. I
Yeah,
mean, for God's sake, right? So
I-
that's been a thing. But yeah, Nolan Jones, just like looking at the initial thing, he's a 16 WRC. Oh my God, he's hitting 143. Yeah, like really back down to earth moment for this guy. And obviously, it's been so bad that I think that it'll have a really grand rebound, or at least I hope it does. But next series, later. Let's
right.
save
Yeah.
it for the next series. But yeah, I just think that the Rockies, this has been a team that's been really rough for a while. A lot of the moves that they've made haven't made a lot of sense. But granted, I can relate. You know what I mean? To an extent, while the Padres obviously have a lot better players and a better team and they're more of a contender, they've had some questionable moves, for sure. And I think that has reared its ugly head around. Still this year, they still have this shadow of like, who looks really great on the Yankees right now? Juan Soto. You know who doesn't look great? All the guys that you extended instead of worrying about like, let's just figure out Soto first before we get into everybody else. Machado, he's on the paternity list right now, but not a great year last year, and he's, he's still good, but he's still had a couple moments where you're like, oh,
Well,
okay, come
recovering
on,
from injury too, right? I mean, I
recovering from the
actually
injury.
didn't know that he wasn't playing third
Yeah,
base.
yeah, not playing third base yet. They said end of April, but something tells me that it's going to take longer. I feel like we would have heard some more details about that. And then you've got, Xander Bogaerts, who's been a disaster for this team. He actually wasn't as bad last year, so there was a lot of hope heading into this year. But now you're looking at a guy whose hard hit rate is declining again, and that's not good. Don't get me wrong, he's never been a hard hit phenom. This is not Nolan Jones last year. This isn't
Mhm.
Bryce Harper or anything like that. But for it to decline twice, that raises some red flags because you're only going to get worse as you get older. So that's a little bit of a problem. And you have, I guess, Jake Cronenworth. Jake Cronenworth's been like one of the big bright spots, as well as Jackson Merrill, the two bright spots for this team. Because in my opinion, Machado playing well, expected. Tatis returning to MVP form, had a couple hits today as well, or last night, had a couple the night before as well. That's not a surprise, but it's awesome. But it's also not really a surprise. I think everyone knew. You know what I mean? Oh, hey, all of the betting sites and whatnot knew. All
Right,
that sponsored this show, right? They were like, this guy's going to be back to his MVP form. So you have that. But Cronenworth and Merrill, that's been the big thing. But it's a team that's treading water. You know what I mean? For every good Cronenworth looks back, actually got robbed in the first game of a couple hits, the ground double play, the dive in the outfield, and he's still been great. He's made some, aside from last night, some good defensive plays too. And then Jackson Merrill, the Merrill madness, right?
Right.
But then you have Michael King last night, where he's been really hit or miss. You have Joe Musgrove's peripherals not great. You Darvish on the IL with a neck injury. He should be back soon, but he's been a little bit shaky. It's just for every good the Padres have, they just don't know how to have players who are just fine. You know what I mean by that? Like
Right.
Musgrove's a 4 ERA, not a 6.
Right.
Darvish is just okay. It's always like we'll have an A plus, and then it's almost undone by an F minus. You know what I mean? That seems to be this team's issues. They just are not good at performing on all cylinders, right? Like that's the problem. And maybe when the starting pitching finally works, then the bullpen will fall apart, which has been one of the bright spots for this team this year. Like excellent. Enel De Los Santos, he was great in the first game. Yuki Matsui still got an ERA under 1. Robert Suarez looks like he's back to what he was in 2022. Like bullpen, I think should be great. But what the Padres do is every time you have something going well, another thing just completely falls like a Jenga tower. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the perspective on the team right now. It's frustrating. I still have hope. Obviously, it's way too early not to. But man, Some really concerning peripheral stats, I think, especially with their starting pitching, Musgrove and King in particular.
Before we end this segment with your final report card grade of the Padres 1 month into the season, I want to ask you an interesting question here. Whose contract is going to be worse for their team, Kris Bryant or Xander Bogaerts? Because Bogaerts is playing.
I know.
You know, like I mean, I took the over on Kris Bryant home runs this year, and I'm already feeling nervous at it. And
I know,
like at this point, I mean, to have Kris Bryant and I haven't done a lot of criticizing, but we had this whole thing. Kris Bryant's going to play first base, and then they throw him out in right field, and he takes a terrible route at a ball. He twists, he turns, he crashes into a wall, and guess what? He's out. He's on the IL. I mean, literally exactly how you pictured it going for Kris Bryant. It went exactly that way. The Rockies didn't change anything. And now I'm sitting here and as frustrating as I've seen your tweets about the Xander Bogaerts experience this year.
Yeah.
But he's on the field,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, he's taking at bats and I baseball, it's kind of tough because Kris Bryant's been, abysmal when he's been on the field this year. I'm just curious, do you see out of those two players who is going to benefit their team? Because these are two contracts that are going to really hamper both of these teams.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating question. Obviously, the better player right now is Bogaerts because we just saw it last year, right? Like still 4.7 F4. The only problem was he was historically, just like the rest of the team, bad with runners in scoring position and high leverage. And that's something that usually doesn't translate year to year. So we were like, all right, the skills are still there. So all you have to do is just not be atrocious when people are on first and second. But now the hitting ability isn't there. I think that this is more of a which contract hurts their team more. In the scheme of things, it's kind of harmless if Kris Bryant, you know what I mean? It's really unfortunate, but it's not like the Rockies are in a win mode. It's not like they have a limited budget issue. Bogaerts, on the other hand, this is a guy that, because of all the moves they made, extending Cronenworth, extending Darvish, extending Machado, extending Suarez, all those guys, this needs to be looked at as you did this stuff before you got Soto. And if you did that, then we're in a situation where it's like, this is the type of decision that ruins a team's potential to contend. It is. Eric Hosmer hurt this team big time for a while with that decision to give him that big contract, right? It's the type of player that will just send you backwards so much that you're just going to be constantly digging out of that hole. And unless you luck into a wild card spot and you pull like that Nationals team from 2018 or whatever, it's just a big deal. So I think Kris Bryant, and I know that sounds patronizing, but like I feel like it's a lot more harmless compared to Xander Bogaerts, especially because I think there was some red flags with the Bryant thing. Like, why are we? So you gave up Nolan for nothing, and then you just went out and spent on Kris Bryant. So I don't know, but I will say at least Xander's on the field. At least he's on the field.
And that's, and really, that's really what we'd want to just see from Kris Bryant. Play 150, 130 games so we can give you the benefit of the doubt of letting you get through the slump. We haven't even ever been able to experience a month of Kris Bryant without it ending in an IL trip. Like it's never been that way with him in purple. That's what makes it so frustrating. And I know how much he's valued by the people that brought him in and in that locker room. People speak highly of him. He has the track record, but you really can't sit there and say that his time in Colorado has been anything short of a failure. I mean, I hate to be mean and that brutal, but it has not lived up to a World Series MVP, a guy that is that has game-changing abilities. Javi, before we go to the break, real quick, just what's your report card for the Padres so far a month into the season? I'm just going to give you the short answer for the Rockies. I'm giving them Fs all the way around. I'll give the starting rotation, actually. I will let them and allow a D because there have been some decent performances in the fact that this team has had 5 quality starts, maybe even more in certain instances, and the offense has gone 0 for 5 in that situation. But they've also been lit up and terrible in other instances. So I have really, the Rockies' first month has been terrible. I'm curious what you would do for a report card for the Padres here a month into the season.
I got to think about that, man. I got to think about it. You want to head to break?
All right. I'll give you a sec and let you think on that. And we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about if there's one thing Javi and I like to do, it's hate on the Dodgers. And we're going to do that coming up in segment number 3 here of this special crossover episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Padres. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes DoorDash. I mean, folks, you know DoorDash. You're hungry. You're sitting there. You're like Javi. You're sitting there watching a West Coast team on the East Coast. It's late, and you need to get something delivered because you need something tasty when you are going and watching the game. DoorDash has you covered, and you can get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15+ on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. Yes, that's right, folks. It's not just food. Maybe, guess what? Mother's Day is coming up. And if you forget, you can use DoorDash to order flowers so someone can bail you out so you don't get in huge trouble and mom comes and hits you over the head with a rolling pin. You can get that 50% off your next order, up to $15, spending that $15+ on that next order. You can see all the great action for yourself on the DoorDash app and get all your Mother's Day gift all in one place. And you can get, like I said, 50% off that order. Head on and use that code LOCKEDONMLB. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get that 50% off order when you order using DoorDash today. Make sure you download the DoorDash app and order all your Mother's Day gifts available on the DoorDash apps today. Terms do apply. This is Locked On Rockies. This is Locked On Padres, and we're going to hit you with some rapid fire stuff going on here. Javi, we'll end with your Padres report card. I'll ask you this question here.
Yeah.
How much can we buy into the Dodgers' slow start, and how high on a scale of 1 to 10 can we turn up our Dodgers hate-o-meter as we are official members of the Dodgers Haters Club?
We're official members of the Dodgers Hater Club. I dare to venture that I've been even more hating of them. Yeah. I think Will Smith is a chump. I literally titled that as one of my videos.
I did see that.
I know. And I got a comment. What are you talking about? He's a top 3. I'm not talking about his skills as a player. I'm saying what he said to profile was some chump stuff to do. That's just disrespectful. And that's why you got your butts kicked. No, I'm not. I'm just not concerned about them. You know why? Because they've had some injuries. Bobby Miller heading to the IL. You have Clayton Kershaw on the IL. You have Walker Buehler still on the IL. They can get pitching reinforcements. And I just think that with Ohtani, with all those guys, with guys like Yarbrough, with guys like Evan Phillips, they won 100-something games last year without Glasnow, Teoscar, Shohei, what else? What are the
Hercules, Zeus?
Yeah, there's all sorts of guys. Yeah, Zeus, exactly, Poseidon, and all these guys, right? Like they have all these stars, and they're just going to get better. I think they will be fine. However, what I will say is the whole best team in history thing. No, it's not happening. Frankly, I would have said that before the season started. And for any season, whoever breaks the Mariners record, it's going to be a good team that no one expects, where all these players have careers, because that's what happened with the Mariners. You know what I mean? The Mariners had like Ichiro and Edgar. Thank you, reaction thing on my screen. It chooses the best times to do that automatically, by the way. It's really impressive stuff. Like you have all of these players who were, you had Ichiro, you had Edgar, and maybe even Jamie Moyer. And then you had these solid players who just had career years. And that's something that you can't replicate or predict. So I don't think that's going to happen. But maybe it's a sign that at least the division will be slightly more competitive than we thought. But in my opinion, it's injuries. I think at some point they're going to get rolling. They added a lot of new players. Maybe they got to figure out the chemistry. I think that they'll be fine. You know what I mean? And the fact that Will Smith is like their 7th best bat, that's all you really need to know. Like, that's insane.
Mookie Betts is arguably the best player in baseball. Shohei Ohtani still hitting the ball really well. I will believe the Dodgers are dead when they're actually dead. Biggest threat to the Padres postseason hopes, the Giants or the D-backs? Quick answer, lightning round. Just
D-backs. I'm going to say D-backs, although it's D-backs. It's D-backs for right now. I know that's easy to say, but still.
Ben Kaspick is fuming at us right now.
I know.
All right, let's close it here, Javi. I told you I'm giving the Rockies basically Fs across the board with just starting pitching, giving them the benefit of the doubt of up at a D, maybe a D+ there, considering Cal Quantrill's been pretty good. Give me your Padres report card here heading into the second half of this series against the Rockies in the second month of the season.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you bullpen, starting pitching, and offense. Let's start with the bullpen. They get an A+, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not because they have the best bullpen in baseball, although they've been up there. I don't have the stat in front of me. I'm going to look it up, though. For me, it's if you lose Josh Hader and you are retooling your bullpen, the only big names that are coming back from last year are Robert Suarez and Tom Cosgrove for the most part. You add Wandy Peralta, you add Enio de los Santos, you add Yuki Matsui, you add all these guys, Wandy Peralta, and for you to succeed very well and be just on the money, you saved money by trading Scott Barlow away, and you got some other guys. It's an A+. They've been really, really sharp. And considering they lost Hader, right? For you to be a better bullpen so far than you were last year without Josh Hader, that's smart baseball and something that this team isn't always the best at doing, which is procuring depth and just being well built throughout. So I think that they deserve an A+, seriously. Starting pitching's a C-, man. It just is. And it hasn't been that bad. I understand that. But I'm talking more about what I'm worried about, that it could get worse. The fact that the peripherals on Musgrove aren't great, right? That's something that really worries me. The fact that the peripherals on Michael King aren't great, that worries me. So to me, he's the Joe Musgrove, his velocity's down a little bit. That scares me. So while, yes, the Padres' overall ERA as a team, I believe, is 10th, that's good. But that tells me that soon the dam is going to break. Michael King didn't give up any runs for not that many runs. Then the Dodgers lit him up for 6 home runs. The Padres won that game, but because they made a good comeback offensively. So that's my worry. Cease is great, but could we be looking at a team where it's Cease and then a bunch of that's what the fear is. And then maybe you have to rush your prospects and stuff like that. So they get a C- for now, although I have liked, guys like Waldron and Cease. And then the offense, I think it's a B+. I do. I think they've been really solid there. I think that when you take into account Cronenworth, when you take into account Merrill, Tatis back and all that stuff, they've just had some weird bounces not go their way. But I think for the most part, they've been really effective, and they've been great at driving in runs compared to where they were last year. So I think they're a B+. However, the Bogarts, the still some weird situational hitting things where why are you swinging at the first pitches, guys? Come on, let's be productive and make this Rockies bullpen work.
Right.
They're 12th in every category. Make them work a little bit more. So it's Bogarts. It's, Luis Campusano a little bit with his defense. It's Hassan Kim's slow start. Machado being a little bit up and down. So it's a B+ because at the very minimum, guys that were wild cards, X factors, Cronenworth and Merrill have been great. So I think they deserve credit.
My favorite Padre to watch right now is Hassan Kim. I love that guy. He's a ton of fun to watch.
Remember yesterday, the falling catch or whatever, the outfield, he just tripped a little bit and he got up. He's like, whoa, he's like, wow. Play. Yeah. He's like, I made it. I'm alive. I'm good.
There's a lot of people and shout outs. He was terrible. We talked about this, terrible with the Rockies, but I think there are a few clubhouse guys better than Jerks and Profar.
Oh, our guy. I forgot about him. I feel ashamed that I forgot about him. That
horrible as a Rocky, but you know what? Shout outs to him because he's great there. We're going to wrap things up here. Locked on Rockies, Locked on Padres. Javi, where can they go? Make sure they're staying up to date with all things Padres, all things
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, the best name in the game. JAVIIPENO, and then at @O_Padres for just the show account for updates, posting the episodes, all that stuff. Baseball versus the World, my new podcast. So you can check that out, Baseball versus World. And justbaseball.com for my writing every now and then. And that is about it. We're really, it's really revving up. I feel like we're in the moment when we can start actually having big takeaways from all the data and the different players and all that stuff. Because it's more than, a bunch of games. How many games have been played? 24 or something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, there you go. Just about a month's worth of games here. Already going to be wrapping up April next month. For those out there, I'm Paul Holden. You can find LO Rockies on Twitter, Locked on Rockies on YouTube as well. Your subscription to Locked on Rockies and Locked on Padres is the easiest way to help the shows grow. We really do appreciate that. Go check out Locked on MLB for your second listen of the day. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked on Rockies and Locked on Padres podcasts.